Here's a topic that I've had a discussion with a number of my athletes around over the last few weeks, and it's one that comes up regularly. So I thought it'd be worth sharing with the audience. So I'm talking about the grey zone. I'm wearing a grey sweatshirt just to reflect that we're talking about grey zone. So what is the grey zone? It's essentially a training zone that sits between above your aerobic threshold and below your lactate threshold. So if you're looking at numbers, it's zone 3 essentially. And the amount of time that we spend within that area is dependent on the part of the season that you're training in. But for the most part, if you are developing an aerobic base, or if you're looking for recovery sessions, then doing your best to avoid training in this grey zone will be the best thing for you for improving your fitness, reducing your injury risk, and just becoming a better and better athlete all around. So it is a little bit different between swimming, biking, and running, and that's where you need to discuss with your coach specifically how it works and within your strengths and weaknesses. But essentially, we're looking at about 80% of your training time is below your aerobic threshold, 80 to 90%, and the remaining 10 to 20% is above your lactate threshold. Now, if you did 20% of your training as a runner above your lactate threshold, you're probably going to get injured. So I would recommend for runners that it's actually closer to 10%, maybe even 5% over your lactate threshold is the amount of time that you spend in that zone, which means that you may be spending 90 to 95% of your training time in that below aerobic threshold range, and you could almost get away with 1 or 2% of your training time within that grey zone area, just to remind your body of what it feels like. But it's certainly an area that we want to try and avoid for a long time through an aerobic and a build phase. Obviously, as you get in towards race-specific work, that grey zone may reflect your race intensity and paces and power. So you do need to spend some time there. But we're talking the final tweaking stages of your training plan going into a key event. So, and there is an area in cycling what we call the sweet spot, which actually sits just below your lactate threshold, about 88 to 94% of your functional threshold power, and that sweet spot is an area that you can spend some time at training. It's a relatively good training zone in that you can do quite a lot of it without hurting your body too much, but still elicit a training effect, positive training effect. But we're talking cycling here, maybe for swimming as well, but certainly not for running. For running, we're really trying to avoid that area. The main reason for that is when we're looking at efficiency, optimizing your metabolism, reducing your carb utilization, increasing fat utilization, that is going to happen under your aerobic threshold for most people. So if you're spending time above your aerobic threshold, then you're not really going to that fat burning state, you're more of a carb burner, and you're not really doing yourself any favors if you are wanting to improve your metabolic efficiency. It's also too fast to do back-to-back sessions with. It just ends up hurting your body too much. You'll get tired, you'll get fatigued, your body will start hurting, you'll start hating running, and worst thing, you'll hate your coach. But however, if you are running in that zone 1, zone 2 range under your aerobic threshold, you just find you can do a lot more of it without hurting your body too much, without stressing your systems, without getting fatigued, and in the end you actually do more training at lower intensity, and that's got a more positive effect. So if you're the sort of athlete that does find yourself falling into that grey zone, really work hard to get yourself out of it, because it actually isn't going to make you a better athlete. Like I say, there are times in your training plan where you do need to fall into that zone, but for the most part, you shouldn't be running, riding, or swimming too much between your aerobic threshold and your lactate threshold. It just doesn't do you any favors. We see it year in, year out with athletes who become grey zone trainers. All they do is they plateau and you don't see any improvements. And a lot of the time they get to a key race and they're injured, or they're tired, or they're sick, not able to complete the event to a satisfactory level. And it just doesn't have to happen. They can spend the quality time in the right zones, get to race day, feel fit, feel fast, and achieve their goals. So that's basically it in a nutshell. There's a lot of stuff you can do reading around it, and I do recommend that you do. And if you think you are the sort of athlete that does fall into that grey zone area, then just have a look at some of the stuff on the internet about how to recognise whether you are that sort of athlete, how to get yourself out of it. The best thing I do, and I do with my athletes, is we determine and we define our training zones accurately. So whether you're working on a heart rate, pace, or power, we define exactly where those zones are and spend a lot of time ensuring that you don't drift out of those optimal training zones. If you do, then a change needs to occur. It may well be that you've actually improved in your efficiency and your aerobic threshold pace or power has actually improved, and all of a sudden you are operating in a what will look like a grey zone, but actually as you become fitter, your zones have shifted. So that needs to happen as well, and we do see that happen quite a lot. So it's a good sign. But if you are finding that you spend the bulk of your time between your aerobic and your lactate threshold, then find a way to get out of it, because you aren't going to be doing yourself any favours. It's also important to note that the areas above your lactate threshold, that's your VO2 max in anaerobic and for cycling in neuromuscular zones, they're very, very good quality training, but they do hurt and they are hard on the body, and you do need to have adequate recovery between them. So if I was to do a VO2 or an anaerobic run workout, the breaks, the rest I have between the intervals, I often recommend people to use it as a walking break. There's absolutely no harm in doing that. It just allows you to hit the next interval with the same high quality, same high intensity, and be able to complete the set properly. So yeah, that's an important thing to understand. You shouldn't be doing your anaerobic or your VO2 workouts with the rest intervals being too hard, because again, that's going to cause some problems. But let's get into a different topic. But what I want you to understand is training in the grey zone is a dangerous place to be, and it doesn't allow you to become the athlete that you have the potential to become. So hopefully this has given you a little bit of information. If you need some clarification on these things, just send us a message. We'll be able to help out. But yeah, it's an important thing to understand. So good luck with your training. We'll see you around.